In 1455, the Battle of St Albans ended, at least on the surface, with a Yorkist victory, but this triumph did not conclude the Civil War. It merely marked the opening act. Richard of York had captured the king on the battlefield and killed his rival, the Duke of Somerset. Yet this military success did not translate into lasting political power. The truce declared after the battle resembled a blank sheet labelled peace, empty both politically and constitutionally. England was still ruled by a king, but that king, Henry VI, remained fragile, passive, and dependent on those around him. Though York re-entered the political centre after St Albans, he was not formally reinstated as Lord Protector. As he had been in 1454, he held influence but not constitutional authority. Even with powerful allies like Warwick and Salisbury, York could not secure lasting support in Parliament. The post-war order was woven with ambiguity. There was a crown but no leadership, a government but no direction. Most crucially, not everyone believed in peace. Margaret of Anjou, in particular, never accepted the truce. She held York directly responsible for Somerset's death and viewed the entire episode as a coup against her husband. In the king's continued silence, Margaret emerged openly as a political actor. The greatest obstacle to peace became her unyielding fury and unwavering opposition. During this time, neither side rearmed, but they watched each other closely. York himself remained uneasy. His victory at St Albans brought neither lasting security nor widespread legitimacy. He was a man who had won, but who still had to justify his cause. This short truce was, in truth, a vacuum. The real war had not yet begun. Despite his victory at St Albans, Richard of York failed to establish stable rule. Instead, another figure quickly stepped into the spotlight: Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick. In the aftermath of 1455, Warwick became more than a Yorkist ally. He emerged as a man of the people. His rise stemmed not only from lineage or military prowess, but from his ability to connect with urban politics in London. In the capital, Warwick quickly became a power centre. He was known for his communication with the public, his ties to merchants, and his commitment to order. His reputation grew not just through the sword, but through his bond with the people. Especially through his naval appointments, Warwick gained influence over the fleet, turning maritime control into both military and economic leverage. Rising Yorkist sympathy in Parliament, combined with popular fear of renewed civil war, allowed Warwick to be seen as a guardian of order. During this period, a growing passive dissatisfaction with Margaret and her Lancastrian allies left a void that Warwick eagerly filled. The king remained ineffective, Margaret appeared aggressive, and Warwick came to embody stability. While York himself remained a polarizing figure, Warwick emerged as a system-friendly alternative, someone who could carry Yorkist claims without threatening total upheaval. This balance would soon unravel and drag the country back into war. In September 1459, England again descended into conflict. The fragile peace established after St Albans had collapsed. Queen Margaret viewed the Yorkists as an ongoing threat, especially as Warwick's influence in London grew and York's royal ambitions became harder to ignore. In this environment, Margaret adopted a harsher stance. The goal was no longer peace, but purge. The Battle of Blore Heath became the first open expression of this renewed tension. York's ally, the Earl of Salisbury, Richard Neville, was marching south from the north to link up with York and Warwick. Margaret sought to prevent this union and dispatched a royal force to intercept them in Staffordshire. The army was led by Lord Audley, a staunch Lancastrian. While Margaret herself was not present, the army operated under her orders. On the morning of September 22, 1459, the two forces clashed on the open fields of Blore Heath. Salisbury's army was outnumbered. Roughly 5,000 Yorkist troops faced nearly 8,000 Lancastrians. Yet the outcome hinged not on numbers, but on strategy and discipline. Salisbury feigned a retreat to provoke his opponents. The Lancastrians mistook it for weakness and launched an attack. But it was a trap. The Yorkists had positioned themselves advantageously behind a narrow river crossing. As the Lancastrians attempted to force the crossing, the terrain disrupted their formation and turned the clash into chaos. Lord Audley was killed during the battle, and his death shattered the morale of his troops. More than a military win, this battle granted the Yorkists a crucial psychological victory. For the first time, they had defeated the king's forces in an organised field engagement. Blore Heath was not just a skirmish, it was a signal that the Civil War had entered an irreversible stage. It marked, in a sense, the moment bloodshed became a fixed front. The violence was no longer personal, it was dynastic. The kingdom was not merely fighting battles, but fracturing at its core. Still, this victory did not solidify Yorkist control. The royal faction, and especially Margaret, characterised the conflict as open rebellion, and they would soon exact a severe price for that rebellion. By late 1459, civil war had become inevitable. In response to the Yorkist triumph at Blore Heath, Queen Margaret and her allies prepared for full retaliation. The battle had served as an alarm, but now came the counterstrike. In October, the royal army mobilised. Margaret sought to encircle Warwick, York and Salisbury via Gloucester. The Yorkists, aware of the threat, entrenched themselves near Ludlow at Ludford Bridge. There, about 8,000 York. This time, the king himself accompanied the royal forces, marking a symbolic shift. But for the Yorkists, morale broke down even before battle began. The presence of the king stirred doubt among the troops. Many soldiers, especially those drawn from the Calais garrison, were hesitant to raise arms against their monarch. Margaret and her advisers exploited this, issuing general pardons to anyone who had abandoned the Yorkist cause. The psychological campaign worked. On the night of October 12, 1459, with royal forces camped nearby, defections began in the Yorkist camp. What followed was not a battle, but a collapse. York, Salisbury and Warwick fled before fighting even began. Warwick escaped to Calais, York fled to Ireland, Salisbury withdrew north with his son. Ludford Bridge was a defeat without combat, yet it was no less devastating. The Yorkists were no longer rebels, they were fugitives. Margaret and the royal faction seized the moment. Yorkist estates were confiscated, their supporters tried and some executed. A special parliament convened in Coventry and formally declared York, Warwick and Salisbury traitors to the crown. This has been described as a reassertion of royal authority, but not of stability. Margaret had triumphed, but England remained fractured, and loyalty to the throne was deeply unstable. Ludford Bridge was not the end of the Yorkist cause. It was the beginning of its second act. The humiliation radicalised figures like Warwick, turning their campaign into more than a dynastic feud. It was becoming a struggle over legitimacy itself. The bloodless victory at Ludford Bridge gave Margaret the opportunity she had long awaited. With the Yorkists dispersed, their leadership in exile and popular support momentarily silenced, the Queen turned her attention to erasing them legally as well as militarily. In October 1459, a parliament was held in Coventry, soon dubbed the Parliament of Devils. It was not just legislative, it was punitive. York, Warwick, Salisbury and their allies were convicted of treason. Their lands were seized, their titles revoked, their names disgraced. This was not merely war, it was the legal redefinition of legitimacy. In this moment, Margaret ceased to be merely the king's consort. Henry VI remained passive. Margaret now acted as England's visible ruler. She engaged directly with nobles, conducted diplomacy, and oversaw military planning. It was, in effect, her government. But this harsh approach did not breed lasting loyalty. The attainders of 1459 drove many Yorkist sympathisers underground, but not into silence. Rather, they began to regroup. For men like Warwick, the fight was no longer about power alone, it was about principle. Margaret's ascent came at the cost of a deeper fracture. The monarchy was now not only at war with swords, but with laws,